when Philip first very kindly and generously approached me to participate in this conference, it was on the basis of a paper I had written about Chabad's use of technology. So I think I was a little misleading, because he said that he was envisioning doing this really visionary and dramatic project of bringing together practitioners. This dramatic project of bringing together practitioners and academics, theologians, and I think I was supposed to be an academic. But I never get to be the practitioner. And I really wanted to be the practitioner. So I took a little bit of a leap off the deep end. And the paper that I'm going to speak with you about is unlike anything I have ever done before, both in terms of my own scholarly work, which tends to be, I swear, despite this paper, really very scholarly. There are lots and lots and lots of footnotes, I promise. And instead, I decided to actually take to heart what I saw as one of the central calls of this event, which is to think about the place of spirituality in practice. And spirituality is one of those awkward words. It's really fine if you're New Agey or if you're a hipster, or if you're looking for meaning in life, and I know we're going to hear a little bit about that from some of our other participants, but it's kind of hard to be, and I think this is what you were alluding to a little bit, it just doesn't seem quite serious unless we get all like phenomenological on that, right? So what I see is actually making meaningful in everyday lives the ways in which our world views our practice, our spirituality, and the things that we do in the world are made manifest, are made real. And for me right now in my life, the way that that happens is around what I see as three core pieces of my identity, which is my scholarship, my parenting, and my religious practice. And in many subtle ways, those all get drawn together, but I hadn't quite realized how until I sat down to really think about this. So the phrase, "you know nothing," kept repeating in my head when I was pregnant with my second child. No Game of Thrones fans in the room? Really? Really? Guys, get out more. It was partly a nod to the Game of Thrones books, the most recent of which I was saving for the delivery room, which some of you will know was an absurd thought, and partly a simple acknowledgement of my state of mind in the world. I thought I knew everything, but really, I knew nothing. The point was driven home when I overheard two low-income mothers in the dollar store talking about their struggle to feed their infant children on the government food assistance program. Yeah, I knew nothing. The conversation haunted me. Words kept forming and reforming in my head about my ignorance, about what it means to be a parent in the world, what it means to be a privileged parent in the world, and what it means to be a parent without privilege in the world. And I needed to get those words out. Some of you know what that's like, right? They need to be said. So I sat down and wrote them. I had the vague goal of maybe kind of sort of trying to submit them to a blog somewhere, but I didn't know how. And let me point out, by the way, I was on parental leave when this happened. Otherwise, there would have been no like writing for fun. Okay, so this was a unique confluence of events. So a woman in my neighborhood mentioned Kfeller, a Jewish parenting, but mostly mommying blog. I scoured the website for a how to submit section, and I couldn't find one. I didn't know about length. I didn't know about format. I didn't know who to send it to. It didn't even occur to me that I'd get paid. I just sent it to the info@ address and put it out of my mind. The editor liked it. She edited it and posted it within the next few days, which also, by the way, is incredibly gratifying. For those of you who have never blogged and are academics in the room, imagine writing something and it coming out a week later. And now, imagine thousands of people reading it. My very first blog post, I'd entered the world of parenting in the 21st century. And I'd entered a whole lot of other worlds that I didn't know about at first. Generous online community, warm and supportive writing feedback, vicious and aggressive comments that attacked what I believed in, my life, my parenting choices, my religious choices, how I looked, how my kids must have looked, what my partner looked like, who I was. And I never learned to ignore these. But mostly, I'd entered the world of seeing my name on a screen, maybe forwarding it to a few people, probably my mother, maybe not, depending on where I was with my mother that day, and then having it disappear after a few hours. until the next post. So I kept writing. I was on parental leave and had some time. It was fun. I liked the idea of an audience, even sometimes a small one. I liked being able to sit down and download the thoughts in my head. But most importantly, for me, and again, I said at the beginning, this is all about me. It helped. It helps. It helps me sort through my concerns, fears, anxieties. It helps me celebrate the beautiful moments, the things I'm proud of. It helps me acknowledge the moments when these intertwine and see a way forward that honors both the difficult and the beautiful. And it helps me because I'm part of a community doing the same thing. And I'm going to use the term parent blogging from now on because the term mommy blogging is, like so many things associated with women, used as a kind of put down, a way to take the practice less seriously, a lesser form of engagement, and a culturally less rich type of entertainment. And for those of you looking for scholarship on this, you can look at some of the work by Janice Radway about soap operas, or you can look at Jennifer Weiner's recent battle to gain legitimacy for so-called chick lit fiction. Also, non-female identified parents can also write about parenting. So, parent blogging helped me write. It helps me become a better writer. That makes sense. But it helps me in other ways. It helps me become a better parent. Perhaps that's not terribly surprising. Thoughtfulness, and today's big buzzword, you all know it's coming, mindfulness, should, right? Everywhere, mindfulness, should and likely will benefit whatever practice to which it is being applied. More surprising in my case was that I never, or very, very rarely, actually write about my own parenting practice, or even my own kids. I'm private like that, and I want to be private about their futures and their activities as well, because I'm not critiquing, but some people will write a lot of stuff about their kids, and their kids are going to read that one day. All right. But in writing, I also read and engage and think. Writing is a fundamentally thoughtful and mindful practice, at least for me. Blogging helps me be a better citizen. I know the debates about slacktivism. And for those of you who aren't familiar, that's basically pretending you're being an activist by doing something on the internet. I embody them in many ways. I'm a slacktivist. I'll get frustrated by something, more than frustrated, angry, desperate, panicked, terrified. This has been happening a lot lately. I'm sure some of you can relate. And then I'll throw out a series of tweets and like and forward a whole lot more. Sit down in a rage haze and write a blog post and rant and rant and rant online. And then I'll feel better. I haven't really done much, if anything, but it helps. I feel part of the conversation, and I am. I'll get responses, and I'll look for them, and I'll figure out what to do next. And it helps because it gives a home for my rage so that I can go home. I can be the parent and partner I want to be. And my newly contained rage can be discussed and activated rather than infecting everything else. It's not nothing, and writing does that. Parent blogging gives me a focus and a home for my rage haze writing. It gives me an audience too, and that's nice, but sometimes it doesn't feel like the point. Except it kind of is the point. It matters that I write for a parenting blog. It matters that I write for a Jewish parenting blog, even if Jewish culture and practice doesn't always directly come up, and that's the research side of this project. Is religious parenting actually about religion? How much does religion get activated in the communities who participate and the audiences who listen? Religiously organized parenting forums sometimes get criticized for lack of continued direct engagement with questions of faith. It's true that if one were to select a random sampling of articles on, say, Feller.com, some would not contain direct references to Judaism. But for me, being Jewish is so deeply integrated with my outlook on life, my way of being in the world, my value system, my relationships, that parenting, perhaps the thing that most directly calls on all these commitments, is always already a Jewish practice. I don't always mention Judaism, but my blogs are always necessarily Jewish. Parent blogging helps me be a better Jew. That needs some unpacking. I imagine we'll be getting into this a little bit. I don't mean that it helps me be a more observant Jew or even a more knowledgeable Jew. I don't think those things make someone a better Jew, if such a thing is possible anyway. What I mean is that writing about parenting in a public way keeps clear to me the ways that my Judaism inflects my decisions. It does. Sometimes I don't totally realize how. Writing about it lays it a little more bare. I hadn't anticipated that blogging would be a spiritual practice. It is. I always knew that academic writing, in its best moments, approaches the spiritual, got me to a kind of place where I didn't always recognize myself when I read my words after. Does that happen to some of you? You read something and you're like, gosh, I sound, who's that? And then you're like, how can I get back to that place again? Or was that just a one-off? So, yeah, sometimes I wonder who that person is. That writing takes a kind of a state of meditation, a communion, a kind of prayer. Blogging isn't like that. It's short and sharp and is all about taking the recognized, known words and committing them to paper. It's fundamentally about recognition rather than its opposite. But still, it's spiritual. It's a practice of awareness, of infusion, of being deliberate. And it's a practice of community. Even if no one reads what I write, even if I write into the void, which is exactly like academic work most of the time, it is predicated on the, I'm checking to see who's listening. It is predicated on the assumption of community. But all of these claims that I've made so far are reflective and ungrounded. If a graduate student handed this in to me, I'd put a lot of little notes saying, evidence, evidence. These are not academic claims. They are not scholarly, not exactly. Many critics would say that blogging by its very nature cannot be scholarly. Blogs are short, usually. They are personal most of the time. They have an argument, ideally, but they need not be supported by evidence. Rather than the result of painstaking research and careful use of exactly the right language, blogging is about reflection, thoughts, and ideas. Scholarship is about ideas, isn't it? Parent blogging made me a better scholar. Not because of the writing aspect, though it certainly impacted my style, my linguistic flexibility, the way that the words in my mind get transferred to the page, but because it made me a better and more regular thinker. That's not a huge innovation. Some scholars have been emphasizing the importance of engaging in broader conversations for a long, long time. Others remain skeptical, not necessarily because of a kind of protectionism for the preciousness of the ivory tower, but because certain kinds of discussions and analyses require a particular language embedded in and emerging out of specialized study and discourse, right? Both can be true. Debates are enriched by a wide range of voices and interlocutors, but some issues require a particular kind of expertise to be solved and understood. But there's no issue that cannot be clarified by making it clearer. It's tautological, but it's also true. The best way to understand something is to explain it in a way that makes it understood. The issue of publicly engaged scholarship has had some attention recently, as a generation of scholars raised on the internet and a generation of advisors trying to catch up see their research as an extension of all the other conversations that are widely shared. There have always been public intellectuals, rather fewer than in the US than in other places, but those were high-status roles reserved for big men who win big prizes and capital S shape the capital D debate. There are still people occupying that niche, but today's publicly engaged scholars are blogging, tweeting, podcasting, curating Insta stories and Tumblr pages, and linking their activism to their scholarship to their lives online. The establishment, in this as in many other arenas, is behind the trend, but not so very. Academics have long been writing for The New Yorker and other magazines, but now they don't get shunned for it. It's always been a curious love-hate relationship between popular media and the press. We want so desperately to be recognized by them. I mean, what wouldn't I give for a New York Times book review? But we still imagine we are above them. That's also changing, with younger scholars at the forefront of projects like the recent launch of the Washington Post's history blog and David Sessions' recent piece in the New Republic about thought leadership and the expanding venue for voices. We still don't know exactly how to count this kind of scholarship, but as Keisha Blaine and Ibrahim Kendry's viral essay in the Chronicle of Higher Education argues, we had better figure it out, and soon. I think there have been shifts in the Academy's relationship to non-scholarly outlets. Popular writing used to be tolerated by some, as long as it didn't detract from the serious work. Then it became a valuable way to publicize one's scholarly efforts, and I'm going to close in a few minutes. Writing a post about one's recent research in a lay magazine was worthwhile because it brought attention to the real article. We're probably still mostly in that sphere, but even that might be changing. The lay magazine article may well be worthwhile in its own terms, though tenure committees have yet to figure out how to credit it. I have, in a roundabout way, argued here that blogging, and specifically Jewish parent blogging, sits at the nexus of three core aspects of my identity and practice: scholarship, parenting, and spirituality. But I want to emphasize that scholarship and writing are not interchangeable, which is to say, it is not simply because blogging is writing that it resonates with my research. Rather, this form of engagement with ideas, one that is necessarily accessible and outward focused, generates more ideas in conversations with others and in the life of the mind. That circles back in its way to spirituality, but it also begs the question, is there something particularly spiritual and scholarly about Jewish blogging? Is there something particularly spiritual and scholarly about parent blogging? Yes. Writing, and here I'm going to close, writing is a fundamentally spiritual practice for me, and parenting is a fundamentally Jewish one for me. Blogging in particular is a communal form of writing that depends on an audience, real or imagined. While in many ways I blog for myself to get the words out, the words are in because of the world I'm in. The words that need to be blogged are different than the words that are written in service of my academic research. Blogs are conversation inflected more explicitly by my spiritual and ideological and religious commitments, but they also activate and drive my ideas more broadly. When I write about something, it helps me clarify what I want and need to know. And while there are multiple ways of knowing in the world, the academic one is deeply satisfying. These pieces are fundamentally connected. While it would be nice to believe that blogs transform those who read them, and that Jewish parenting blogs in particular play an activating role in the world, I leave that to more empirical approaches in the future. Instead, I hear him offer a much, much more modest claim. Jewish parent blogging has been a spiritual and socially transforming practice for me. As we think together today about the intersection of spirituality, social transformation, scholarship, and practice, we must be attentive to the deeply personal ways in which these interact. I hope we can discuss this more in the broader conversation and think about how we can activate the spiritual nature of scholarly research, and not just scholarship about spirituality and its connections to social transformation. For now, I've offered some reflections into my own grounded experiences that will help guide my research going forward. And now you all know more about me than even my mother. Thank you.